Well, how the heck are you doing here in New York? So about 40 years ago, I became quite interested in going beyond the realms of biology and chemistry, because I was seeing that what was called the healthcare system, even the natural healthcare system, was far from working. And as a matter of fact, it was backfiring in a high percentage of cases. I saw in my country, and as I traveled the globe, the masses becoming weaker, more tired, more confused, and lacking energy. So I had to find a way to resolve that, at least in my own heart and my own head. Because if I was going to purport to be a healthcare professional, I wanted to give the right answer. And that took away the veneer that we today call medicine. And I started to ask the very important question that sadly is not taught in medical schools or naturopathic school or nutritional school. Who are we? Where did we come from? And when I would ask this to my professors in biology, they'd always start with a cell. A cell came a long, long, long time after where we came from. So here's what we've learned from natural history, from studying the multiple universes that we're now aware of. And what we're going to unfold in this segment is the future of medicine, where we're going to go. And it's exciting, people, so don't be disappointed, because we're on the verge of major breakthroughs, so that pain and suffering and disorder will be something in the history books in the very near future. So this all began about 13.5 billion years ago with a B. And back then, out in space, there were two H's, helium and hydrogen. And somehow they started to kiss one another. Can you imagine that? And when helium and hydrogen kissed one another and created that friction, something really weird happened. A big explosion occurred. And that was the beginning of molecules. So matter began, as we understand it, as we know it, where you came from is the absence of anything. The explosion created matter, which is the beginning of your structure. Isn't that great? Most of you don't look like you're ready to explode. Implode, yes, but not explode. The next big event came about 300 million years later, when molecules started to kiss, and they created little babies called atoms. You're made of atoms and molecules, by the way. Look at your skin. Oh my God. It's atoms and molecules. And you know what happened pretty quickly? Organisms came. And the very first organism was a plant, lo and behold. And it was a plant that we now believe came out of what we've identified as nitrogen, which makes things grow, and vitamin C. And they kissed, and they created algae. Now, the earth at that point, that came out of matter and atoms, became completely round and surrounded by water. And so life began in that water. You began in that water. But you began before that water. You began 13.2 billion years ago when atoms started. And before that, 13.5 billion years was molecules. And before that, you were hydrogen and helium. And we don't know what you were before that. Next year, I'll tell you that. You keep delving into this stuff. It's just fantastic. Now, these organisms started to kiss, and they started to create a lot more things than just little microscopic algae that, by the way, gave us oxygen. So thank you, because all of us breathing here, listening to me around the world and in this room, are doing so because of that extraordinary element we call oxygen coming from plants. Now we come to more recent history. 500 million years ago. And then what you and I call the brain began. I think we need another 10 trillion years for this to evolve. But anyway, the reptilian brain began. So these organisms that became reptiles literally didn't even know what to do. They were confused most of the time. And they were running around, running into walls, not knowing how to procreate. They didn't even know how to kiss, like all the other things knew how to kiss. So this brain developed so that we knew how to breathe. That's what the reptilian brain does. We know how to maintain life and survive, so what we call fight or flight came out of the reptilian brain. And the most beautiful part of this, marron, romance, came out of that. So we men spend a lot of time in the reptilian brain. The ladies here know that. Now, about 125 million years ago, a second layer of the brain. The reptilian didn't go away because we needed to make love and breathe and fight and survive. But we shouldn't fight. We should learn how to thrive rather than fight. But we're still fighting, as you notice. And what occurred is this little limbic brain started to grow. And when the limbic brain started to grow, it gave us wonderful things like empathy and compassion and feelings. And you and I call that realm emotions. Now, we haven't done well on using it properly, but that's where it began, at 125 million years ago. And in recent history, 2 to 3 million years ago, the third layer of the brain showed up called the neocortex. And the neocortex is where foresight, insight, and hindsight comes from. Now, how important is that? Foresight is, I can't do that again because the last 200 times I've tried it, I failed. That's what foresight is. Hindsight is, I've done it 200 times and I've failed, but I still did it 201 times. But insight is also known as ESP, extrasensory perception. Pretty interesting stuff. So the higher brain, it's a triune, 3-layer brain, is in place now. And here we are at the beginning of the 21st century, and we have war, and we have hatred, and we're dying of disease, and we're suffering, and we have a healthcare system that makes you sick, and we have political systems that are destructive. And the beauty and the presence of God in the universe has given us the greatest gift that any creature, any organism has ever had on this earth. Shame on us. So we start from nothing and we become who we are today. And who we are today still has the grand ability to be anything, to do anything, to heal anything, and most important, to say we're relevant and well. You want the R and W. You want to be relevant and you want to be well. Most people are not relevant. Why are you here? Well, to be comfortable. If why you're here is to be comfortable, you're taking up space, please leave. What is your contribution is the question. So, those of you who are sick and whining, oh, I'm sick, God make me well. God made you well. God made you powerful with endless potential. Nothing can stop you. And the universe is what you're made of. Over the decades I've loved and played music, I've always listened to the lyrics that said, we're made of stardust. It's a fact. Your body is made of the 115 elements that most of us learned about in school somewhere in our teens, called the elemental tables. little elements that were a result of that explosion that happened 13.5 billion years ago. Because what that made is called a star. And we're going to delve into this a little deeper now than we have so far. So we're going to talk today about quantum human biology. And quantum human biology is the entire future of healthcare and medicine, like it or not. Today, the status quo is working on biology and chemistry. And the institutions and the economics that drive the institutions are about two things: money and old-time, not so important information. Isn't that sad? It's completely sad. So we're going to now begin by showing you the way the universe really, really works. That universe has come together and created numerous planets. And it was not until the year 2003 that we proved what people like Max Planck, a quantum physicist, talked about in Europe more than a century ago. And what he really was saying to us is everything is particles. You're made of particles. Everything you see, touch, feel, those of you sitting here in this auditorium today are literally made of particles. And those chairs you're sitting on are particles. Isn't that interesting? And even though you don't look like a chair, they have a lot of the same elements that you're made of. And although the rug that's below your feet, and wherever you're sitting out there at home on a couch, it's actually made of similar things to what you're made of. Because all life is made of frequency. Isn't that amazing? And that frequency is what we now have to start to deal with. That as a director of Hippocrates since 1980, I created an energy medicine department. And our medical doctor is literally the head of our energy medicine department. Because yes, we're interested in chemistry, yes, we're interested in biology, but what really propels that and makes it work or not work is a frequency behind the biology and chemistry. How many of you have ever noticed that batteries are made of minerals that literally create what? Acid. And that acid gives what? Energy. So why would you not be looking at particles of friction that come together that create the propulsion of your cells? Now remember, you're made of all of these cells. And these cells are extraordinary and beautiful and endless. We start to look at the way the universe works together. 2013, the Mars probe started to photograph the multiple universes. And the multiple universes are cones, black holes that begin the universe. Comes out to a cone, goes back to a cone, and there is another dark hole that leads to a secondary universe. And how many are there? Endless. The great thinkers of today tell us minimally there are billions of other universes that you're all part of. And in certain religions, the mystics actually told us thousands of years ago that every cell in our body is like the universe. So they understood what we're now discussing today, but it was completely overlooked because there was no way to make money on that one. You told people basically, you access all of your energy, all of your power for what's around you. You don't have to go to somebody who treats you to get well. You start to what? Tap into what has been here from the beginning of time. And that's what we want to talk about and teach you today. Now when you start to go through the sky and then the universe, you start to notice it looks very similar to the cellular structure of the body, the circulatory system of the body. And each organ in the body you can equate very much so to a planet that's out in the universe. And each of those planets interconnect with one another and interdepend on one another. For instance, the problem we have in specialization in medicine today is if you go to the heart doctor and you talk about cancer, they say, oh no, you have to go to the oncologist. If you go to the orthopedic doctor and say, you have to look at my brain, oh no, you have to go to the neuron scientist. And they don't realize that all of this organism that came out of nothingness literally is one. And everything depends upon the full and happy, full function of the other organ systems in the body. Now, how can those organ systems work together? How can the cells even move through the body if they don't have enough not enough energy? It's impossible to do so. So we've been using technology to help that happen. We see every single disease as a blockage of energy, more so than a tumor or a vein that's clogged or an organ that's not working. I know when I was a kid and I couldn't afford a good car, my first car, 1955 Buick, I bought for $50. And on very cold days here in the New York area, I would have to jump start it twice a week. And that's what we have to start thinking about, jump starting our physical body again. And when you go a little bit further with all of this, it's just unbelievable. You start to look at the way the earth works. So the sun, without the sun we would not be here. In the middle of it, every single second creates endless protons. We don't even have a number for that. Endless zillions of protons. And they start bouncing back and forth on neutrons for 100,000 years. Imagine that. So when you go out and feel warmth, it's the neutrons and the protons that are smashing into one another hundreds of thousands of miles away that bring that warmth here. After 100,000 years, think of this is just amazing. They hit the surface of the sun, and then they shoot off. They eject from the sun, and they take 8.5 minutes to reach the planet Earth. Isn't that remarkable? And what evolved on the planet Earth, we'll go back to what we said a few minutes ago, were green leafy plants. And another big word beyond the periodic table you learned when you were a teenager was photosynthesis. And so the photosynthesis process is where the sun and the protons that when they shoot off the sun become photons, meaning light. They're moving so fast, they transform from molecule structure to light structure, that's subatomic structures. They are captured on a green leafy plant. Now let's talk for 1 second about diet. The conscious people here listening will understand this. The unconscious ones are going to want to know from Dr. Smith how many nutrients they need tomorrow. The conscious ones will know that if every drop of energy and life on this planet comes from the sun, and it's captured on a raw, green leafy plant, what do you think we should be eating? I know this is New York. They get this in California, I'm going to tell you right away. Whoa! Raw green leafy plants. Should we cook that plant because Dr. Jones said it's more digestible to kill something? Should we fry it? Should we butter it? Should we massacre it? Should we blend it and make green smoothies? Or should we respect the cyclical process of the creation of the existence of life and you? It's up to you. You can sit and listen to old school stuff. You can come along on this voyage and go into the future. So at Hippocrates, our founder, who thank God did not have a scientific background, so she wasn't corrupted in any way, and she didn't know what she couldn't say and couldn't do and couldn't think, because she wasn't encaged into the academic jail that we've created with the intellectual community today. And she said, well, look at that. I'm going to try this on babies and chickens. Factual story. And in a room, she would put raw food, cooked food, and she'd put chickens in the room, and she'd put babies in the room. And overwhelmingly, what did the babies and chickens go to? the raw plant. The adults would say, let's fry the chicken, let's fry the plant. So she said, well, the baby is seeming to be a little bit more enlightened. And back in the 1950s, said everyone has to get on a raw plant-based diet. Could it be that simple? Why shouldn't it be that simple? Does it have to be convoluted? Did I have to get a PhD in nutrition to teach this to you? Seemingly, or you wouldn't believe me if I didn't have that. But you better believe me, because if you don't get this now, you're going to get it in the future. This is where it's all going, people. Once we get the greed out of the way, once we get the institutions, we don't have to worry about it. They're collapsing on their own. They're not economically sustainable. We're going to have to replace them. And let's hope we have enough spiritual increment, awareness, consciousness, and chutzpah to replace it with this. We started this nearly 65 years ago and have watched the result of putting people on life. It's really interesting. There's an old adage that you can't change. Life creates life, life begets life, death creates death. Now that's like 1 and 1 make 2. But seemingly that's over most people's head, because Dr. Schmahutz from the University of Barump said, no, you got to cook it for 2 minutes, and then after you cook it, you got to poach it and putch it and putch it and putch it up, 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 up. And you say, okay, that sounds good, because I can fill my head up with nonsense, because I really don't want to eat raw plants. You think I wanted to eat raw plants? I didn't even know what a raw plant was. I looked at a raw plant, I thought that was garnish for hamburgers. I get it. So that's how it works. And guess what? Yes, all of you, like me, say, well, if you don't get sun, you don't get vitamin D. We don't even have an inkling of all the incredible things that the sun directly on your body does for your metabolism. We do know for your immune system, because when I was a kid, they would actually teach that formally in school. The number one way to strengthen and boost your immune system is to be in the sun. Then all at once, 40-some years ago, the sun became a bad guy. Oh, if you go in the sun, you're going to get cancer. And all of you cower in your houses and put cancer-causing sunscreen on and eat cooked food because it's yin and it's yang. And it's not so smart. And everyone says, well, traditionally we've done this for 1,000 years. Well, that's the problem with it. If it's been going on for 1,000 years, it has to be wrong. If I come down here in the audience and I whisper in her ear, and she whispers the story, and by the time it gets to the back of this room, it's not even the same story, not even vaguely the same story. So you think 5,000 years of doing something, we figured it out? Those of you that like tradition, this is not a good lecture for you. Because we're talking about every single day being open to the future. Every single day being aware that our obligation is to move further into the areas we don't understand, we don't know, we don't perceive, and are not often accepted. All of the great leaders through history, in whatever field of endeavor they were in, were always considered nuts. Well, that's a distinguished position. I've been called that quite often. But I'm just reporting to you what the great thinkers do. I'm humbled by the intellect of the great quantum physicists and the great quantum biologists today that literally are brave enough to say to you, step beyond the norm, because the norm is abnormal. So now we look at plants. Look at the beauty of those plants. You ever seen anything so remarkable? And every plant originated with that algae. And about 1 million years before there was any other land on this planet, the island and continent of Australia came up out of the ocean. And somehow, the algae in the ocean poured on the shore and seeded and became grass. So the very first land-based life form was grass. And can you imagine that a redwood tree, have you ever seen a redwood tree? You can't even see the top, you get dizzy looking. Came from an invisible algae and a grass. And you, my brethren, came from that too. So do you think we should fuel ourselves with a life force that God, nature, the universe give us? Or do you think we should compromise because we're so much brighter than God and the universe? We're so much more capable, so much wiser than the universe. Or do you think we should relax, let go, and allow everything to work the way it ought to work? Humans create their own problems because lacking substance, lacking values, lacking virtues, we feel we have some significance by stress and pressure, rather than true significance by relaxing, freeing ourselves, and becoming part of the whole. If you're not part of the whole, how do you expect to access the energy from the whole? It's not the resistance that makes you strong. It's joining the ever-growing continuum of life that always moves in the right direction, never stops moving, and has no beginning and no end. Think about that. Scary for most of us, isn't it? I teach this, and it's awesome and overwhelming to me sometimes.